Hi. You know when someone is boring? You know, like boring people? They're like walking foregone conclusions with most everything they do or say. Like, you know what they're gonna do, you know what they're gonna say, you know what they're gonna wear, and what they're gonna order off the menu, and the long list of things that they don't like. But then, once in a while, they break character and do some crazy outlandish shit for a little while. And then they go back to being boring. And that's basically all you can remember about them. That one little snippet that stands out against all of their bland, uneventful lives. And you're left like scratching your head trying to figure it out. Like, is that what they're really like? Is that what they want to be? Maybe I don't know them well enough. Or just like, what the fuck, dude? That's how I feel about Chanel. Now, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you'll know that I'm not a fan of their fragrances. Bleu de Chanel. More like meh de Chanel. I just find them so boring, which is really strange because Chanel herself in her heyday was the greatest innovator of modern fashion and beauty. But what you're seeing today is the definition of what it looks like to rest on your laurels. Well, we figured out the formula, so I guess now it's time for the different flavors of the same formula. Let's not change it because it's worked so well for us so far. And whilst that'll work, and it has been very successful for Chanel, they're not really at the cutting edge when it comes to memorable fragrances. You know why? Their fragrances aren't divisive enough. I mean, they're well made, no doubt, and presented with class and quality and evoke an imagery of high style. But they just lack feeling, character, danger, the risk of being ostracized. And even if they try to do it, they just don't go far enough to make it look authentic. So it ends up looking strained, like Antaeus. It's certainly not Kouros, is it? Like, if Kouros was the Hulk, then Antaeus is the Hulk in a suit. Yes, he's in a suit, but it doesn't work because it's the fucking Hulk. He doesn't belong in a suit. Stop putting everyone in suits, Chanel. To date, there's only 3.5 fragrances from Chanel that I absolutely adore to bits. The half is for the original number 19 Eau de Toilette. The other 3 are Gardenia, Coco Eau de Parfum, and this, the coveted and now ridiculously expensive Coromandel Eau de Toilette. This one, Eau de Toilette, it says on the back. You can't maybe read it. There it is. Eau de Toilette. I mean, I have more Chanels, but the reason it's these 3.5 is because they are the innovations of their time. Like, imagine number 19 back in the day when it came out with its green juice and it was like, what's up, son? I'm as green as fuck. What you gonna do about that there? And in 1970, people were like, whoa, that's pretty green, and I can dig it. Word. Now, there's an old saying that many cultures around the world share, and it's about societal conformity. It usually goes something like this, like the nail that stands out will get hammered down, right? Some shit like that. But my take on that is, if you're going to stand out, then you better stand out higher than any hammer can reach. That's what these 3.5 were and are, and that's what Coromandel Eau de Toilette was. When the Les Exclusives line was released, this was the one that drew the ire of some, but the absolute adoration of others. A wet, damp patchouli with white chocolate nuances that, if you oversprayed it, could literally knock people out. It's so freaking strong for an eau de toilette. I think it's the strongest eau de toilette I've ever encountered in my entire life. And I honestly think it smells like shit if you bury your nose in it. This is one that you need to experience in the sillage. You get wafts of it, and it's absolutely beautiful. Spray it on your clothes and come back to it the next day, and it's absolute heaven. This bottle right here that I've got is from 2007, and I don't have much left, but I don't care because, well, this is enough to last me for many lifetimes, I think, because even I don't overspray this, and that's saying something. I've seen bottles with less juice than this going for around $750 on the grey market, and I've seen a slightly used bottle going for almost $2,000. Why? I mean, they still make this fragrance. You can go into a Chanel boutique, not a boutique, you can go into the Chanel sort of beauty and makeup sort of boutique or shop where they stock the Les Exclusives line, and they still have this, okay? They still make this fragrance, but they did reformulate it back in 2016. So this was the Eau de Toilette, and they called it the Eau de Toilette Concentrate. They said it was a concentrated Eau de Toilette, which probably explains why it's so bloody strong. But they reformulated in 2016 and they brought it back as an eau de parfum. Now you can buy the eau de parfum from Chanel, and a 75ml bottle will cost you about $300 Australian. So why would anyone pay the almost $500 more for the same amount of the old eau de toilette? Is it because we're bored and that boredom is the modern endemic and that boredom motivates us to do irrational things? Now, boredom as a scientific branch is, funnily enough, very interesting and extremely complicated and in its infancy in its research. But there was one study that caught my attention, which was a study that gave its participants a choice. Now, the participants were asked to sit in a room for about 15 minutes alone and think about something pleasurable, like maybe wearing Coromandel. But they had the choice to either think about something pleasurable or there was a box on a table in that room. And if you press the button, it would give you a mild electric shock, like enough to shock you, but not to kill you. And what happened? Well, about 67% of men and 25% of women decided to shock themselves. And in the 15-minute period of the experiments, those who did shock themselves ended up doing it multiple times. So much so that one guy actually had to be excluded from the experiment because they thought that he broke the machine because of the number of times that he actually pressed the button. And what happened with the results? Well, I guess the researchers asked these people, why did you press the button to give yourself an electric shock? And the answer was, well, duh, it was really boring just sitting there. Now, the most interesting thing about this study is that boredom motivated people to do something to stop themselves from feeling that way, even if that thing that they were doing was as irrational as giving themselves an electric shock. Is it because we're strangers to ourselves? Is it a failure of imagination? Is it not knowing ourselves enough to know how we will feel in the future? Or is it the opposite? Is it that we know that Chanel is going to bring out another boring fragrance, so we engage in an irrational activity to avoid it, like paying $2,000 for an old bottle of Coromandel? All of these are good questions, but the real question on my mind is, why would anyone find thinking about something pleasurable a boring experience? Well, I know that if something is too simple or too safe, like a Chanel scent, it can get very boring, as is something that is too hard or complicated, like the current state of the world. No. The interesting things lie in that bittersweet spot. The things that are pleasurable need to be simple enough to understand or do, yet still pose a challenge to overcome. This is how you kill boredom. Unfortunately, this is not how the world works. So, in this boring world with your boring self and your boring life with its boring choices, to think that the only action that you can take to relieve it is an irrational one is a foregone conclusion. Humans making irrational decisions? How boring.
You